Theodora.
Μονοποιούν θαύμα.
The 6th century Roman empress
Είμαι η Θεοδώρα, η φίλη του Βυζαντίου.
is here depicted in the game Civilization V. Speaking Greek. But how is the Greek that she speaks? Let's find out together. I'm Luke, and this is polýMATHY. Since you wanted more video game ancient languages, and since you wanted more about the Eastern Roman Empire, we're going to combine them both together today as we learn a little bit about Theodora.
Ναι, φίλτατος.
Theodora was one of the most interesting figures in all of Roman history. She even ruled in her own right when her husband, the Emperor Justinian, was in a coma for a long period when he caught plague. And we're going to talk today about one of the most famous scenes in Eastern Roman history when Theodora really takes charge. But first, let's talk about how she is speaking.
Μονοποιούν θαύμα.
To me, the voice actress definitely sounds like she is a native Greek speaker.
Ποιον όνομα υπημισέ ο καλός ξένος?
She has that beautiful retracted S sound, that s. In English, we usually use a non-retracted or laminal S sound, s, which is higher pitched than the sh of modern Greek, European, Spanish, Finnish, Dutch, and Icelandic, among others. Thus, the retracted S sound, sh, is correct for both ancient Greek as well as Latin. But is this really ancient Greek? Is this the time period that's appropriate for ancient Greek? The Greek language goes through very slow changes through its history, and the written Greek in this period was extremely similar to the Greek that was spoken in the Koine period, which preceded it. The language here, insofar as it resembles ancient Greek, is appropriate because that was certainly common, at least in the writing style of the time, despite all the other changes that were happening to the language in different registers. But the great part about having a modern Greek speaker doing older forms of Greek is you get that feeling of authenticity, which I perceive in the intonation that she's using,
Μονοποιούν θαύμα.
as well as certain phonetic aspects like the retracted S, like in the word xenos.
Ποιον όνομα υπημισέ ο καλός ξένος?
Kallos xenos. Isn't that great? Greek is amazing. And of course, she's also using the modern Greek pronunciation of all the letters and sounds, which is normal for modern Greeks to do in school. The equivalent for Latin would be the ecclesiastical pronunciation. But a key difference is that while the ecclesiastical pronunciation is really inherited from a system of pronunciation developed somewhat artificially under the Carolingian Empire, most of the modern Greek sounds are relevantly applicable to the sound of Greek during this period. So exactly when the U closes to E and when the E closes to E as well, which is of course how she's reading them, which is the modern Greek pronunciation for those letters, it's possible that they could be closed to E for both of those sounds in this period. So it's close enough to being plausible that I can accept a modern Greek pronunciation here, and there are some discrepancies, but we'll just leave it as it is.
Είμαι η Θεοδώρα, η φίλη του Βυζαντίου.
I fili tu Vizantiu. So this is odd. The translation given in the English is saying that I am the favored empress. Well, the word empress, which is Vasilia, the queen or empress, it was the same term, is not given here. I don't know why. I think it's kind of odd. It's like, it's a little arrogant, but whatever. I am the dear one of Byzantium. And that's also weird because using the name Byzantium in this time period seems a little strange. From my research, it seems that pretty much since the previous emperor, the name Constantinople was the standard term for this city. But of course, this comes from the idea that, this is the Byzantine Empire, which is a modern term that is not really applicable to the historical term that they call themselves, which is Roman. These are Romans. So that seems probably to be the reason why the term Byzantium is used here instead of Constantinople, or in fact, Rome, which is what this place actually is. That's the name of this empire, Rome. Using an old-fashioned name like that is almost like saying that Charles de Gaulle was the darling of Lutetia. It's like, okay, sure, but is that name really current?
Ναι, φίλτατος.
Beautiful, that retracted S in filtatos. Sounds very much like a modern Greek speaker, doesn't she? Unfortunately, this speaker didn't complain when the vocative wasn't correctly applied here, because filtatos means dearest one. It's like carissimus in Latin. So for her to say filtatos is wrong because it needs to be filtate, which is the exact same kind of transformation that modern Greek would do too. So I find this really, really weird that it's being ignored here. The vocative case is a special change that you make to a noun when you address an individual that you're talking to. In the case of philtatos, dearest one, if you say, hello, dearest one, it would be here philtate. And that's the change of os to e.
Ομολογείτε.
Sounds good to me. Omologite. Just the modern Greek pronunciation, and that's the word.
Ουδήπου.
Udipu or udepu, which would be the older pronunciation, meaning not at all, no way.
Νυν φίλε, εταραχαίου πρέπουσιν, διδάξομαι σε μάθημα.
Here we get to have the word didaxome or didaxomai in an older pronunciation. And didaxomai is the middle voice version of I will teach. What's the middle voice? That's an excellent question. That is something that students and teachers of Greek have been trying to understand for literally thousands of years. The middle voice in general gives the appearance and the feeling of using passive verbs with a rather active meaning, and that's what makes them middle. So you have an active voice. Marcus hits Quintus. Passive voice. Quintus is hit by Marcus. In Latin, that would be Marcus quintum pulsat and Quintus a Marco pulsatur. And then you have a middle voice, which is between Marcus hits Quintus and Quintus is hit by Marcus. So what on earth is a middle voice? Well, I'm really glad you asked that. Well, it doesn't exist in Latin, but it is a really important aspect of Proto-Indo-European and also one of the most conservative of the attested literary Indo-European languages, being ancient Greek. Didaxo would be sufficient to mean I will teach. But didaxomai or didaxome, this means both I am going to teach and I am going to be taught, because this middle voice is in between. Really, this is most similar to how the Romance languages tend to use reflexive verbs. And the example that I learned when I was studying ancient Greek in Italy many years ago was this Italian phrase, starting with compro una bici, I buy a bike. And I could also buy it for myself, mi compro una bici. In a way, this I buy it for myself, this is one of the functions that the middle voice can convey in ancient Greek. And interestingly, we can also see what happens when we put it into the past tense. Mi sono comprato una bici. I have bought for myself, for my own benefit, a bike. And indeed, normally it would be ho comprato una bici. I have bought a bike, but mi sono comprato una bici. We change the auxiliary verb from have to am. To myself, I am bought a bike. So there's this idea with reflexive verbs in most Romance languages of putting it back on yourself for some reason, and thus indicating very succinctly that you're doing something for your own benefit, as well as potentially for the benefit of someone else. And this is an essential function of what the middle voice can also do in ancient Greek. So didaxomai or didaxome means I will teach you. So didaxome.
Διδάξομαι σε μάθημα.
So she says didaxomai se mathema or didaxome se mathema, which means I will teach you for my own benefit a lesson. Now, the for my own benefit, that sounds very formal, but it's really just the exact opposite of formality. It has a much more relaxed, natural feeling of, I'm going to teach you a lesson. It's going to be more like that. And that's what the middle voice can do. It can express that so easily with just a little change. Instead of didaxo se mathema, it's didaxome se mathema. And that is this really cool thing. So something's going to happen to you, because I'm doing it, and it's also going to be for me. All understood with this beautiful succinctness of the middle voice. The middle voice is wonderful.
Τούτο δυσχερείς.
The word dyscheres, or in the older pronunciation, in the loosened pronunciation of ancient Greek, dyscheres, dys is a negation, and inside this word is the word hir, which is the hand. So dyscheres means difficult to take in hand, and therefore is simply difficult, or can be vexing or annoying. So the implied meaning of her tutu dyscheres is to say that this is annoying or vexing or difficult. But there is a problem, because dyscheres is the masculine or feminine version of this object, and the word she's using is tuto, the neuter object. When we speak of things in general without reference to any particular individual or specific object with a known grammatical gender, we usually use the neuter gender in ancient Greek. So tuto is that neuter word, this, whatever it is. And then it should be not these xeris, but these xeres, or in an older pronunciation, dus xeres. So that's a pretty obvious thing not to get wrong for someone who knows more about ancient Greek. In general, what I've seen is that both the Latin and the ancient Greek in these video games, and I'm really, really glad they're doing it, by the way, like I've said in the other videos, it's fantastic to use these ancient languages, even if we get stuff wrong, because it's going to inspire people to want to learn more about the languages, and that's great. That's a good thing. So I'm not here to pick these things to death. Well, kind of. I'm not here to say that something has been done that ought not to have been done. This is a much better experience for all of us, and it becomes a learning experience for us too. But in general, I would say that both the Latin and the Greek will have some surprisingly good stuff, and then suddenly have totally weird stuff. It's like, how could you possibly get this wrong? It's like there's a committee with at least one competent person who's really busy, and then several less competent people who just don't know what they're doing but have more time. And then we get this. Let's talk about Theodora, because this is one of the most interesting individuals in history. She started as an actress and possibly even what is understood to be a prostitute. Very frequently in the ancient world, it was common for the idea of actors and actresses to be involved in prostitution as well, which is why, usually, to be slanderous towards this ruler, it was said that Theodora had been, in fact, a prostitute. In any case, she stole the heart of Justinian, who succeeded to the throne, and thus Theodora became the Empress of Rome. A lot of what we know about Justinian and Theodora comes from the historian Procopius, who was a member of Justinian and Theodora's court and lived contemporaneously with them. In his official history, he lauds Theodora for her courage, bravery, wit, and intelligence. But in the secret history, which may have been written by Procopius, she is vilified, as is Justinian, and everyone else associated with the throne. Understanding what really happened in history can always be difficult when you have this kind of treatment of it. I'm particularly fond of this story, though, of Justinian and Theodora, because it's really a great love story. Justinian, being of senatorial rank, and indeed he was one day going to be made Roman emperor, he was prohibited from marrying an actress. But Justinian loved Theodora. She was the perfect woman for him, and he respected and adored her wit, her intelligence, her humor, and knew that she was going to be the perfect woman for him. So he was able to convince Justin, his uncle who was the emperor, to pass a new law which allowed him to marry Theodora. So when Justinian later succeeded to the throne, Theodora became the empress as well. Justinian had Theodora as an important part of the court, sharing in political strategies, state councils, and all operations of the empire. Provincial officials even had to take an oath not just to Justinian, but also to Theodora. And that's again why in the beginning of the clip from Civilization 5, where she calls herself I filitu Visantiu, it seems so odd to me because she's not just like the darling whatever, she's pretty much equal status to the male emperor. So although she's being depicted solely here without Justinian, maybe she's in that good old plague coma, it seems weird how she's introducing herself as the mere darling of Byzantium instead of the Empress of Rome, I Vasilia tis Romis. But one of my favorite moments in history is when Theodora saves the Roman Empire. Due to really complicated stuff that I can't get into right now, the Nika Riots were happening in Constantinople, and the entire court, including Justinian and Theodora, were ready to flee. They were going to abandon Constantinople and go into hiding, and it probably would have been the end of their entire dynasty. And as all the men were getting ready to leave the palace, Theodora interrupted and said, "My lords, the present occasion is too serious to allow me to follow the convention that a woman should not speak in a man's council. Those whose interests are threatened by extreme danger should think only of the wisest course of action, not of conventions. In my opinion, flight is not the right course, even if it should bring us to safety. It is impossible for a person, having been born into this world, not to die. But for one who has reigned, it is intolerable to be a fugitive. May I never be deprived of this purple robe, and may I never see the day when those who meet me do not call me Empress. If you wish to save yourself, my lord, there is no difficulty. We are rich. Over there is the sea, and yonder are the ships. Yet, reflect for a moment whether, when you have once escaped to a place of security, you would not gladly exchange such safety for death. As for me, I agree with the adage that the royal purple is the noblest shroud. Damn, what a bamf, right? Theodora. She convinced Justinian, let's friggin' stay, and then the whole council stayed, and then they went and brutally killed 30,000 rebels. Yay, Rome! After the Nika Riots, Justinian and Theodora would rebuild Constantinople and also make one of the most famous cathedrals in the entire world, the Hagia Sophia. The story of their romance and their reign in Rome is a fascinating tale, and I would really like to see a movie made about them, wouldn't you? Let's have it done in an accurate reconstruction of the Greek spoken at the time, and in Latin too, because Latin was the official language of Justinian's court. Let's see that, let's make it happen, share this video with people, subscribe to the channel, you know what to do, let's see that movie made. Yeah, Theodora and Justinian, woo! Eros Theophiloi.